Sometimes we come across gorgeous beads that would be wonderful focals, except maybe they just need a little help being a focal. Today I'm going to show you how I take a hand-painted Chinese porcelain bead that's beautiful but maybe a little small for a focal and give it some more presence with a fun tassel. Hi there, Sandy here. Welcome to another jewelry making video at keepsakecrafts.net. So this bead came in one of my recent bead boxes and I thought it was really cool and pretty, but I thought maybe it was almost just a little too small to be a focal. It's a 28 by 18 millimeter hand-painted Chinese porcelain hex oval. The color varies, indeed it does. It's got all kinds of colors with it. I decided that I wanted this to be a focal of a necklace. I could have added other chunky beads like it or that accented it and used it amongst others, but that's not really my style. So I decided to make a different kind of tassel, and my first step was choosing beads. And I just looked carefully at the bead and pulled the colors that were in it out of it. So I looked at the green here and pulled out these little green matte beads, which I thought would be pretty. It's also got some purple in it. And I pulled out these check glass pinch beads, but I ended up not using them. These are some opaque medium purple 3 millimeter check glass beads that I used in another recent project. I think I'm going to be sad when these are gone. I thought the white and the kind of gold color on here was pretty, so these are 4 millimeter check glass beads in beige luster. And then there's also kind of that coppery brown around the edges. And I have these beads. These are bicones that I've had in my stash for ages and used them on lots of different things. And another kind of whitish bead are these crystals. I like the way one side has sort of the beige and the other side is white, and they got a bit of sparkle. And then I went for the darker green, which you can see around the edges. So sometimes it's fun to just study these things and really see all the different colors that are in there. Like I said, in the end I decided not to use these. The next step was to lay out how I wanted them to be arranged in the dangle. And for that I used my sticky bead mat, which I've found I don't really use for beading, but I've been using it for designing. And I pulled out these leaf dangles that I showed in a previous video and ended up not using, but today I decided to use them. And then I started arranging my beads, and mostly these are arranged in order of size. So I've got those dark green ones, and then the kind of white and beige ones, and the brown bicones, and then the 4 millimeter check glass beads, and the purple check glass beads. And I think those will really make fun dangles. I also pulled out a couple of bead caps to go on either end to just kind of fancy up and accent my porcelain focal bead. The next step is to choose some wire, and I just have here 20 gauge jeweler's bronze. So it's a relatively inexpensive craft wire, but it's a nice gold color that goes with everything here. And I'm going to use my one-step loopers to make my beads. So the best way to handle this is just to cut yourself a length, maybe 12 to 15 inches. It's a good idea to use nylon jaw pliers and straighten the wire. Now for this bottom dangle, I'm going to need a bigger loop. So I'm using my 3 millimeter one-step looper to make that loop, because the 1.5 millimeter looper doesn't really give the dangles enough room to move. I'll just open that, pop on one of my dangles. That's the thing, if you have a bead with a hole like this, remember that the hole is going straight, but your loop is curved. So the bigger the loop, the more freely the bead is going to move on it. If the loop is small, the bead is going to kind of get stuck on the curve. So now I've got this piece of wire, and I'm going to put on my bottom bead, which is one of these dark green ones. And then I'll use the smaller looper with the 1.5 millimeter loop for the rest of my bead links. Basically all I'm doing is making a beaded chain with a dangle at one end, and we'll make this into a tassel. And if you want to learn more about the one-step looper, I've done a whole video on it. I really love using it. It just, if I have lots of loops to make, it just speeds things up. So I'll grab my wire now. You just cut off a little bit, so that's really all the waste there is on each of these links. It's just a little bit that you nip off. Slide on your next bead. Slide that down to the loop. So you got to find a balance between cutting a really long piece of wire so you don't have a lot of waste, but then every long piece of wire you have to slide it into the looper. So a balance between cutting a really long piece of wire that you have to slide the beads along every time, and cutting short pieces and having a lot of waste. That's why I've found 12 to 15 inches is good. Now what I like to do with these is grab one loop in my one pair of pliers, grab the other loop in the other, and kind of give them a twist. That hardens the wire and straightens it, and also just gives your dangles, your links, a more cohesive look by having all the loops facing in the same direction. So they're both on the same plane. Now I can open one of these and put on the previous link that goes below it. And close that and continue. So the next one I'll add is this, and I'll add the other three in the exact same way. So here's my chain of bead links for one part of my tassel. And by the way, I ended up not using these little green beads, not because I didn't like them, but it just seemed long enough here proportionately. It just seemed to work well with my porcelain bead. Any longer would have been maybe a bit much. So you just kind of have to make those design decisions as you go along. So then what I did was I took another piece of the wire and I made a big loop, the 3 millimeter loop. And depending on how many chains you're going to put on this tassel, you might have to make it even bigger so that they dangle freely. I'm going to have 5. You can see 4 others I already made on here. And they really are kind of fun. And here's a 3 millimeter loop. I don't think I'd want to put many more than 5 on here. They'd start to get crowded and they just wouldn't dangle nicely. Of course, you want to make sure that's closed really secure so you don't lose them. From here it's pretty simple. I'm going to slide on one of my bead caps, my focal bead, and the other bead cap. And isn't that pretty and fun? It just adds so much presence to the bead without taking away from it. I really love it, and I love the way these leaves at the bottom really add weight to it. I'm going to add one more loop up here at the top of the bead. And what I have here is a 10 millimeter kind of decorative twisted wire ring that will slide very nicely over my chain. So I've just got a length of chain here, and interestingly, let's see if you can find it, I actually didn't have a long enough piece of the chain that I first chose, and I think maybe you can see the transition here. There's actually 2 different types of chain here. I split the slightly heavier one into 2 pieces, and then in between put a finer one in the middle. But you really don't even notice the difference. And so I'm just using this soldered ring as a bail. And if you were going to use a heavier ring, you might want to make a bigger loop than the 1.5 millimeter loop. And there you have a necklace accented by a fun tassel, which is really trendy today. If you're interested in the supplies I use, click on the link in the upper right or lower left of the video or in the description box to go to my blog post where I always have a complete supply list with links to products. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Click the notification bell. And if you'd like to support these tutorials, take a look at my Patreon page for how you can get bonus tutorials and help keep these coming free for everyone. Happy creating. Bye-bye.